Presumption, sorry.
Obviously, this isn't actually connected, so they can. Hopefully, this works. Yeah, they can bring their own laptop up.
It's not to connect. It's just to read from.
Yeah, so you can bring your own laptop up.
Yeah. Are you sure?
Yeah, this is mine. It's not actually connected.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this annual general meeting of Transport for the South East, and welcome all members. And we've got we haven't that now. I'd just like to acknowledge Councillor Humby's contribution to Transport for the South East over many years, and I think with your permission we'll send him a well done and thank you, as he is now no longer the leader in Hampshire. And we welcome
Lulu Burnham.
Welcome Councillor Burnham, and look forward to coming down to see you in Hampshire soon. And Peter is the new man for Portsmouth? No, yes, there we are. Well done, Peter. Thank you. We've got colleagues here from DFT, so welcome to them. We have today apologies from Vince Maple Medway, Ellie-Boroughs Network Rail, and from Matt Borton, the leader at Tunbridge and Malling. So we come to agenda item 2, which is the minutes from the previous meeting. Are there, first and foremost, can I sign them as a true record? Thank you very much. They will be published on the website. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest, and this is the time where Partnership Board members declare any interest that they need to in relation to the agenda. None. We have no statements from the public. So we now come on to governance, and I'm going to hand over to Rupert.
Well, thank you. So members, this is the unusual point of the year where we elect a chair, vice chair and other appointments. I will seek nominations for the role of chairman, and once that is agreed, I'll pass the microphone back to the chairman to take us through the rest of the governance agenda. So I'm seeking nominations for the post of chairman. Councillor Roby.
I propose Keith Glazier as chairman.
And could I have a seconder, please? Thank you. And are there any other nominations? That's a good point, Daniel. Well made. So I look for an elected member to second Councillor Glazier. Thank you. So that's Councillor Dennis seconding. Are there any other nominations? All those in favour of Councillor Keith Glazier taking the chair for the forthcoming year? Councillor Glazier, thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you all very much. It really is a privilege to be in this role. 5 years has flown by. We've got a lot more work to do. Change of government, and with that, many opportunities. So thank you very much. I said to David, I've got 4 pages of acceptance speech here, but I'll save them for my wife and family when I thank them when I get home later. Thank you very much. So now we have to nominate and elect the vice chair. I'd had a nomination from Medway, but unfortunately Vince can't be here today. I don't know if anyone would want to second that, or if there are any other nominations. Happy to second, Councillor. Right. Are there any other nominations? So all those in favour of Medway being the vice chair, for that. Thank you very much. And Vince had a clash of diaries, and apologies for that. So now we need to agree to co-opt for a period of 1 year to the Partnership Board. Can I do these en bloc, or do I need to do them individually? Okay. Chair of the Transport Forum, it's my proposal that we co-opt. All in favour? Jeff French, sorry. Have I not? The existing chair of the do we need to nominate and second in the normal way? I guess we should. So I'll nominate Jeff. Anyone going to second him? Thank you very much. All in favour. Sorry, I'll get it right. I've only done it for 5 years. 2 people nominated collectively to represent businesses, and we have Vince and Daniel here. I'll propose. Is there anyone else to second that? Are there any other nominations? All in favour? Thank you. Person nominated by National Parks and other protected landscapes. Tim's the current nomination. Have we propose anyone seconding? Any other alternatives? All in favour? Thank you. 2 people nominated by districts and borough authorities, and I know one of them is now an MP, and so therefore I'm not sure whether she's still...
Chairman, I might suggest the way in which we have done this in previous years is the boroughs and districts only clearly operate in the areas where there are county authorities, 2-tier authorities, and we have sought that the county members go back to their borough and district colleagues and seek a nomination from there. So you'll end up with 5 borough and district nominations, all of which may sit on the Transport Forum, and then 2 of their number get pulled up into the board to provide you with planning authority and borough and district advice. And so the recommendation in the paper is that process takes place, recognising the fact that Councillor Cooper is now elected as an MP. So that's the process we've taken in the past. If that's satisfactory, we will put the wheels in motion to make that happen.
I think it makes absolute sense for them to designate, but we will agree that we will have 2 nominated district and borough authorities on the board. That's okay. Are we all in favour of that? Thank you. And a representative from National Highways, Network Rail and Transport for London. Again, do we need to name them? We just have them as nominating people?
I don't think we do. All are represented here today, Chairman. We have Richard Lennon from National Highways, Stuart Kister from Network Rail. We don't have anybody from TfL today here, unspotted, but they are all non-voting members of the board, and I think they are key partners, and it's important they sit around the board table and participate in discussions.
And we're very happy to do that. All in favour? Thank you very much. And now we need to allocate voting rights of 1 vote each to the 2 business appointments, the chair of the Transport Forum, and the nominated reps from the district and boroughs. Are we happy to make those decisions? Thanks. Well done. I've already appointed the chair to the Transport Forum, so I don't think we need to do that again. So we now appoint the chair and membership of the Audit and Governance Committee for the period of 1 year. Nominate Councillor Jordan for a chair. Yeah, we can now. All right, thank you. Are we all in favour of that? Thank you. Councillor Dennis. Do we need to? It says here the membership. Do we need to nominate the membership now, or can we do that?
You can nominate that here now. So in the covering paper, there is a recommendation that Daniel Rose and Vince Lucas participate in the Governance Committee. Also, Councillor Trevor Newton. There was, members may recall, Councillor Humby from Hampshire was a member of that, but ceases to be so now. So that is a vacant post. So we do need a member to replace Councillor Humby, and Jeff French also sits on the Governance Committee.
Do we have any nominations for the 1 post that's there, or should we put it as a vacancy? Happy to nominate David. Anybody else? Any seconding, or did yes? Okay. All agreed? Thank you very much. And we are all asked to note the request for members to return a completed register of interests. So that's got the governance out of the way. Thank you all very much, and apologies for slip-ups. We are getting there. We go on to agenda item 6, which is the next steps for TFSE, and I wonder whether I can invite Dan to give a view from DFT before we go over to Rupert to pick up on our view. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Pressing hold, right?
Yeah. Okay, that's definitely working. Yes, thank you, Councillor Glazier. And
just a sort of a brief initial thanks from DFT, and in particular on behalf of our new ministerial team. So you will no doubt be aware that we now have new Secretary of State, Louise Haigh, Secretary of State for Transport, who was the shadow for a number of years, so sort of already well versed in the ways of transport. You may also have caught up with the other ministerial appointments that were made over the last sort of week or so. Most pertinent for this discussion is Simon Lightwood. So Simon Lightwood is Minister for Local Transport and also covers sort of regions and devolution, so relationships with STBs and other organisations. So Simon Lightwood is the sort of relevant junior minister for this portfolio. Other ministers probably worth briefly mentioning. Lillian Greenwood is Roads Minister. I mention that because I know roads are certainly a topic that I know you're all interested in and often come up in our discussions. Lillian Green will also be known to many of you as chair of the Transport Select Committee for several years. So another ministerial appointment who's well sort of got a good background in transport, and probably also worth mentioning. Possibly the best known of all, is Peter Hendy, who is a very well-known transport figure, who is Lord's Minister and Minister for Rail in the department, and many of you will know has done a well-respected figure within rail, but also wider transport too, things such as his role as head of TfL and so on. So I think we've got a really strong ministerial team, and I just sort of wanted to people on their behalf, but also give a bit of an initial thanks at this point for the work over the sort of last year or so with the TFSC and all of you as members of Transport for the South East in the sort of range of work that you've been involved with. A few things I think is probably worth mentioning. The transport strategy is obviously a key part of bringing things together and having a sort of coherent whole to what the region does. I know you've been doing some work on that this morning, which is great, and we'll hear about that a little bit later as well. So for all of your work on that. The Centre of Excellence recently launched, albeit not perhaps able to in such a fanfare due to pre-election period, but really important work nonetheless. And something that's a really important point has already come up actually in some of the things that our Secretary of State has been talking about how we can best support local authority capability and capacity, and another really good example of doing that. So some great work that you've all been involved with. A few things I thought just to give you a few indications of the new government's early priorities. It's I'll try and answer some of your questions later. I sort of warn you in advance that I may not know the answer to a lot of them yet, but a few things it's useful keeping a sort of a view on. The first is that hopefully most of you will have seen the sort of 5 missions that the government set out. So these are broader than transport. These are the sort of 5 high-level missions to which the government is, I think, organising a lot of its work. So those being supporting the economy or kickstarting the economy, greener energy, so green energy superpower, safer streets, removing barriers to opportunity, and supporting the NHS. So within those, there are pretty clear links from transport to all of those actually, and really important sort of parts of the government's agenda. Our Secretary of State also set out her sort of 5 priorities for transport more specifically. You may have heard them, but if in case you hadn't, I thought I'd just sort of run through them with you now. So the 5 priorities are set out are improving performance on the railways and driving forward rail reform. So you will have seen provisions in the King's Speech for legislation on rail that I know we've been talking about for quite a long time. Improving bus services and growing usage across the country, so big focus on bus too. Transforming infrastructure to work for the whole country, promoting social mobility and tackling regional inequality, delivering greener transport and better integrating transport networks. And I thought I'd just pause briefly on the last one about integration. I think a really important point, and sort of right at the heart of an organisation like Transport for the South East, where it's really about looking at things from the local dimension, how the different parts of transport interact, and trying to not get sucked into the sort of very modal view of things, which can sometimes occur. Those are some of the sort of high-level things that the government's trying to do. Also worth probably touching on some of the language that you'll have been hearing around local empowerment. So, Councillor Glaser, you mentioned you were here last week to hear Angela Rayner's sort of speech to the local government authority about devolution, about empowerment. And I think something that's coming through really strongly is a desire to empower local leaders and really make sure we're getting the best of that local dimension, which I think is really important and will be something that hopefully you'll all see the opportunities within that, and above all the opportunity to work with TFSE to sort of give that wider focus to the local empowerment. So something probably also worth just reiterating that I know we talk about quite often in these forums is that we're really well aware in government of the contribution that South East makes to the economy of the UK and the importance of that economy, of all the ports, of all the international links, and of everything else that the South East brings. And whilst in recent times perhaps hasn't been in the sort of the top of the headlines for some of the initiatives, it's certainly well recognised in government, and that some of the key contribution that the region makes. And sort of finally, really, I guess just bringing that back to the point where it's really important to have a forum like this to bring together all the different local authorities to get a sort of strategic oversight, cross-boundary, all the different things that you need to work on together ultimately to get that the sort of best effect. Looking forward to continuing to working with you all as we move forwards into the new landscape, new government, new approaches to things, but some sort of key underlying things that I know people here have been working on for a while that we'll want to continue to do. So those are my sort of main remarks for me. I'm happy to try and answer any questions either now or later, but as I say, will depend on quite what level of discussions have been had yet with new ministers, which has not been that many, but I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Dan. Are there any questions for immediately now, or we'll pick them up later if we need? Over to you then, Rick.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairman. So this paper, item number 6, picks up the next steps for Transport for the South East and builds very much on what Dan was saying. So the Department for Transport has set out some clear priorities around bus, rail, infrastructure, integration. And we would have seen last week in the King's Speech, bill for devolution, for buses, for rail, for planning and infrastructure. And that's quite timely in terms of next steps for Transport for the South East. So as was pointed out in the Transport Refresh session, the South East is that a major contributor to the National Exchequer. It is the gateway for the movement of goods and services. And you just have to look around, the South East region at places like Dover, Southampton, Gatwick, Heathrow on the edge, and some of our smaller ports, Shoreham, Newhaven, Southampton Airport. The movement of goods and services through the South East not only benefits the South East, but has a significant impact on the economic performance of the country. Simply put, if you're moving goods from the Midlands, the chances are you'll ship them either out of Southampton or Dover. So I think it provides us that opportunity to build upon the work that we have undertaken to date. Members will know that we established ourselves in 2017, and the ability to speak with that single voice to ministers, to the Secretary of State and to government is massively important in terms of prioritising and ensuring that the South East continues to be productive and competitive and is frankly on ministers' radars. We know we have significant challenges in the South East. We've spoken about East-West challenges this morning, but isn't it somewhat perverse that it'll take you 2 hours to get a train from Brighton to Southampton for a distance of about 90 kilometres, and yet if you went from London to Manchester, a distance of 250 plus kilometres, it'll take you, give or take, the same time. So that we know that transport reliability and journey times are challenged. We've been operating strategically across the South East, influencing where money has been invested. We've launched our Centre of Excellence, providing direct support to local transport authorities with their activities, particularly around their large local majors and MRM schemes. And that prioritisation of transport infrastructure. It's a specific requirement of the Cities and Local Devolution Act, which, Chairman, when you set up Transport for the South East, you followed the intent of that Act to provide advice to the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State has subsequently said that they will take account of those priorities in setting policy and investment decisions. You'll also know that Transport for the North became the first statutory subnational body in 2018, bringing together local authority and combined authority partners to again speak like us with a single voice. Since that time, there are now 7 STBs across England, and members have held that aspiration to become a statutory body when we first submitted a proposal to government, which set out our ambitions for the region and the powers that we considered were necessary in order to make that step change in the South East. At that time, government said that they wanted to wait until the next Parliament to consider that option for Transport for the South East. So the paper before you is saying, actually, this is the time now with a change of government, change of priorities, much more focus on devolution as set out by the Prime Minister, for us to consider our next steps. Building on a point that was made earlier, there's an opportunity to transform stuff into delivery, to provide opportunities for places. The paper proposes that we work with the department to understand the direction of government and have those discussions with officials at the DfT to ensure that our direction of travel is in line with government policy. But the other aspect is to seek views of local transport authorities and colleagues around this table on your ambitions for the future of Transport for the South East and its next steps. And there is a final recommendation subject to those discussions for me to work with the Audit and Governance Committee in developing options for the future direction of travel for Transport for the South East, to then present that to you in October. So, Chairman, first opportunity to seek views from your colleagues around the table on the future direction.
Thank you. Over to you. Thoughts, comments? Enough thinking. I mean, I think the paper's pretty clear. I think we do need to sit down and work out where we are. And I think we've always taken the advice of DfT officials on timing. But I think it comes back to what we said before. There will be a time, and if we're not ready or clear about what it is we want to do, then we will be on the wrong foot. So if we can work through governance committee to get our thoughts straight. I mean, I think we virtually said last time that the time is right now to consider going for statutory status again, just to enable us to become a delivery agent as well as the ability to continue with pushing the strategy.
I mean, the government's talking about devolution, which I agree with. I hope it's a meaningful thing, devolution. I hope it happens. And clearly the extent to which the government's going to pursue that will impact what we do. Because, I mean, if you ended up with a region that covered the southeast, the area that we covered, there was actually a regional body of some sort, that would probably mean that you didn't need us because we were the transport authority, or we'd have control of the strategic levers. I doubt if that's going to happen. And so there's still going to be a need for us. It's just a question of where it sits in the devolution agenda, and if the devolution agenda is actually a real thing or just an electoral spin. And we'll find that out soon enough, I guess.
I think the message I got from the Deputy Prime Minister on Thursday of last week was actually devolution is us, but as you say, comes in various forms, and let's see what form we end up with. But actually being fleet of foot and able to respond, I think, is the key. Other questions or comments? No? So you've got Trevor.
Thank you, Chair. And just perhaps to emphasise something really, the opportunity that comes with this. The government, I think, is, as you rightfully say, committed to a devolution agenda. What that looks like for the South East might need some work and clarity, but I think there's an opportunity, and I think as Frankfurt South East, I just want to highlight the opportunity that it might give us and really go forward with that and support how we do that as an organisation and make sure we do it well. So let's look for the opportunity if we can. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think we all agree with that. So you have the. I don't like this room. Prefer that screen. I can picture how much easier with it onto one hand. The recommendations are on the screen. Do you need me to read them out, or are you happy to agree them as very much? Thank you. So we now move on to the agenda item 7, the Audit and Governance Committee update, and I think Councillor Dennis is going to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so we'll just go through there's the recommendations at the front, but I just thought I'd give a few words. The paper is fairly self-explanatory, but I thought I'd just highlight a few points. And these really just outline some discussions we had at our last meeting. Firstly, just to say that we did review the final 24-25 budget, which obviously reflected the change in income that had come through. There was 175. We endorsed that particular item that was recommended, and that you'll see in the papers. And as we've just discussed, the committee reviewed the plans for the business plan 25-26. We endorsed the initial priorities, but obviously we noted that, and you'll see this is a common theme, I'm sure, that the officers to ensure reflected any changes in government policy announced in the King's Speech, and probably not long after, because it's going to be a fairly sort of interesting ride for the next few months, probably, as feet get under the table. We also discussed the next steps for TFSE and how we could hopefully play a role supporting the Chief Officer in this work. And as you've just endorsed, that's what we'll be looking at. The other particularly key item this time around was looking at the risk register, which we moved to the 5x5, which I think is the common way most people see it, and I think it was is more reflective of the positions that we have. And no surprise again, number of consequences and potential impact that we gave to the uncertainty around the fact, obviously on the 12th of July, we're only a few days in from the general election. So there were some new risks there, and I don't want to repeat them all, but as you can see, a number of them are around the election of a new government and current uncertainty as to potentially transport strategy, and for us, uncertainty and delays at the moment. And we also raised the point that's just been made as well about the lack of devolution, or what devolution is going to actually mean. And we did actually put in there the impacts of the government's plan for rail reforms are uncertain. Well, it's beginning to evolve, isn't it? So the recommendations are that you note the discussions and actions at this meeting. I think you'll see above, and you're asked to agree the strategic risk register. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for that summary. I think that sums up really well from the Audit Committee. And I think you're absolutely right. We had that meeting just with less than a week after the general election, and a week before the King's Speech. So there's been more clarity come out from the King's Speech, perhaps puts more clarity into some of the discussions we had, and even in the risk register. I think one of the key points from the meeting was also about budgets, and some of that clarity may not be come through until perhaps further announcements from the department and government, and also the autumn statement in due course may also be firming up some of the budgets that are available. So I just want to emphasise the point that we had that meeting, looked at the year ahead, but there may be some question marks about how the budget beds in.
Thank you. The other. Again, thanks for all the work you're doing there. It's, when you see a risk register with laid out like this, it's quite frightening, but it's good to have it, and so well done. See that. Again, we have the recommendations on the screen. Are we happy to endorse? Thank you very much.
And so you'll remember the backward. Sorry about this. Yeah, there you go. We have now received our funding allocation from DFT. As the paper says, we got a big uplift in funding, but it was slightly lower than we'd profiled for. So it was 2.065 million, which means we'll need to make £175,000 worth of reductions to the final budget that board signed off in May. And as the paper says, Audit and Governance Committee have reviewed this and recommended these changes. So we're proposing going for a balanced approach, which protects the budget for our core work streams, so the Centre of Excellence, transport strategy, and making the case to DFT for investment, but balancing the reductions, so reducing £75,000 from freight, which will mean the timescale for freight awareness work will be extended, taking £60,000 from electric vehicle infrastructure work, which means that the development of the EVCI locate tool will not proceed, but instead we are going to roll out TFN's EV tool. And we're also proposing reducing £50,000 from SIP implementation, which will mean in one less scheme being able to be supported. So, yeah, Councillor Glazier, over back to you.
Thank you for that. Comments, questions?
Thank you for that. Replacing the EV tool with the TFN one, is there any loss in functionality, or are we getting the same value for 75,000 less?
It's the latter, yes.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
I think that's worth recording. That's a very positive outcome. SIP screen development, which has led to the Gatwick link being knocked out of the scheme, and we seem to have the money to do it. Why can't we just do it?
Sorry, it's a specific question that I didn't quite catch.
Well, the schemes that are going to be supported don't include the Gatwick link.
Okay.
And I don't see why we can't do it, given we've got the money.
It's ultimately, if the board wished to do it, the 615 allocated for SIP implementation. As members may recall, you all agreed you didn't want to go into a sort of competitive process for bidding for schemes. You know, we wanted to have a sort of light on the earth touch. We did an assessment of a number of schemes of either large local authority majors or MRN schemes, and we've allocated some money to those schemes to help take them forward. I think for Kent County Council, I'm just trying to rack my brains. Was it Bluebell Health scheme last year? You got some fast track. That's right. Sorry, thank you, Joe. Scheme. Yeah, that's another one. We allocated some money for fast track. I think this is early days of bidding for money from the DFT to enable local authorities to take forward some of their programme. We wanted to make sure that we had an equitable spread, but there was light touch on you and your officers in terms of preparing proposals. But David, yes, you make the point that if the board were minded to, you could bring another programme forward. If you were to do that, I'd ask for your advice on what else you would wish to stop in order to balance the budget. That's the dynamic that we're in. There is a broader point here about the timing at which we get funding. It's really important that we have clarity on our funding allocations at the start of the budget setting process. And I recognise, that is challenging for the department to do sometimes. In our business planning process, which we're kick-starting now, there's the opportunity to identify a greater budget line going forward. And whether that's acceptable to the department, I don't know yet. But if you wanted to make a change to this, then I would need you to tell me what you would wish to stop in order to fund it.
I suppose there were two parts. I don't want to make it too specific, even though it was a specific question. I suppose the two things are: we have a surplus. Why can't we spend more of it on SIPs? That's the basic point. And also, indeed, I'd like to understand a bit more about how the schemes were chosen, so that there must be a systematic approach. And I would have thought that would have been signed off at some point.
Yeah, I can take you through. There's a paper coming forward a bit later on in the agenda, and we'll take you through that process. In terms of the reserve, the reason we carry a reserve is in the event that Transport for the South East winds up, there would be redundancy costs associated with it. That is what that reserve is for. And my advice to members would be to maintain the reserve at that level.
So that whole reserve is for redundancies?
That is to cover the costs of winding up Transport for the South East, correct? Because the accountable body would not wish to bear that responsibility.
No.
So the Section 151 officer requires us to carry a reserve, so that in the event we wind up, we can cover our costs in redundancy and other.
Of course, and the reserve is of that size.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Are we going to leave the ifs and buts for the next question? Because you're not proposing we take something else out of the programme. No, you're just asking the question. Okay. Right. I'll pick that up later. Any other questions or comments? No.
We have actually the point. Sorry, Chairman, if I may. It's not about the specific schemes. Although you could have a debate about whether or not you take schemes out, it's about the broader budget. So if we funded further work on SIP implementation, I'd either have to stop work on analytical framework or centre of excellence or what have you. That's the question I'm posing back. If you wanted to change the funding allocations, that's absolutely fine. It's within your gift to do so. But your advice on where you'd want me to take that from is what I would need.
If we decided that we could have a halt on strategy development or some strategy development and put more of that money into SIPs, we could do it and still have the redundancy reserve.
That is a choice. We've always had the strategy development money in there delivering, but if we wanted to change it, it's the board's decision. Not mine.
When does it get the chance to decide it then?
No.
Well, the strategy. Sorry, if I may. So the board signed off the strategy and the development costs. I can't remember which meeting, a while back. So again, if you wanted us to wind down transport strategy development costs, we could do that. I'd want to just check what the implications are. If you wanted to take 50 grand out to fund your scheme, David, then my advice would be don't take it from the strategy, you take it from one of the other areas of work stream.
I wouldn't want to make it seem as though it's just self-interest in Kent. I don't mean that at all. I think in general, having more money spent on SIP and less money spent on some aspects of strategy development, not all of it, would still leave us with the redundancy reserve, wouldn't it? We could do that.
Yeah, that was discussed at the last meeting when the budget was, or the draft budget was agreed, I think, wasn't it? Absolutely. We did set out the draft budget at the last meeting, and now we're for the right reason, we're saying, can we change it? It needs to be changed. There's no reason we can't change anything if we want to. We know the consequences and the timing and such. But this draft budget was agreed at the last meeting.
But we don't have to decide it right now. We could have a look at it, couldn't we?
The budget is there, running day in, day out. David, there's no reason why we can't look at it at any time. You know, the opportunities are endless. But we do need some security and surety for the people that we're engaging to do work. Doesn't answer the question, or it does? Yeah.
No, I just think we should do a little bit more of the scheme development, that's all. While still keeping the redundancy reserve that we obviously have to have.
Yeah. But it's always been very clear that the redundancy reserve needed to be there. That's part of it. Where you spend the rest of the money is down to those discussions earlier on, and I thought we'd agreed it. That's my confusion, David. I thought we had agreed it at the last meeting.
So, just for clarity, we set the budget based on the planning assumptions that were set out in the correspondence from the DfT. We had assumed that, and the advice from the department was make those assumptions. We'd assumed that we were going to secure 2.25 million. We secured about 175,000 less than that. We have looked at the overall budget and said the areas of least impact, given where we are the three that we've identified: freight, electric vehicles, and one less scheme for SIP implementation. You could say, actually, we want to do more on SIP implementation and reduce, for example, active travel or decarbonisation work. You could make that decision. But the unfortunate timing of the DfT budgets means that work has started on the other things based upon the planning assumptions. What we haven't started work on or haven't given a check for is the SIP implementation schemes. So it is easier to not provide an additional scheme than it is to stop work on the other elements of work.
Or is there not something we plan to do but haven't started that we could stop? Because I can see that if you started something, you've got to carry on with it.
When all of the elements that you see there in the Appendix 1 are underway, the only element that isn't underway is the SIP implementation. In that, there is 50,000 there that we have said, well, other stuff's underway, let's not do this one scheme to help us balance the budget. You can see what we've done on the electric vehicle is just said, well, we will, it's not the solution we prefer, but there is a Transport for the North solution that we could use for electric vehicle infrastructure. And freight, the freight work is part of a broader piece of work on freight, which is ongoing at the moment, and we're just going to de-accelerate, if you like, on freight, but work will tick over on it.
I'm not sure where else you want me to go. I mean, we've just had the explanation. Does anyone else want to offer a view?
That's right. Sorry. Thank you, Chair. I just want to just clarify something to make sure I understand what the discussion is about. The scheme that you're indicate you prefer or asking about is specifically something in Kent only, is that the case? Or is it something that could benefit the whole of South East? I don't think how, just want to understand it a bit better, if that's okay.
The specific schemes extend scheme.
Yeah, I understand the wider.
You can't possibly just.
So clarification. So essentially, if the board wants to pursue that Kent scheme, we've got to take something out of the SIP development money. That's how I understand the discussion. I guess from a regional perspective or broadly, I certainly would support schemes that do help the whole region in some way. I don't know whether there's other mechanisms specifically for Kent to help fund that, or whether there's something in the reserve or something that can be considered if that's no. That's my question. Yeah, a clarification. Yeah.
Joy.
Thank you. Given the fact that the funding came in quite late and there's an awful lot in traction at the moment, it's quite late in the day, and I think that Rupert put it quite clear, explained it and clarified it, the fact that there's only certain places where the money can come out of if we wanted to change that particular perspective at this moment in time. And I think it would just have to go for conversation, for discussion around the table and a vote if any changes wanted to be made. But I think Rupert has explained exactly where the funding really needs to go. So I don't think it would be practical to stop anything unless we thought it was the most sensible thing to stop. But it's not really, is it now? Now that we're 4 months pretty well into the year, and it's proper to discussion for next year. Would that work better? Yeah.
Chairman, if I may, I think you make a really important point about actually it's more money for delivery. That's the fundamental, isn't it? What can we get going? I think there is a moment that we're going to be starting. There's a separate paper in the board pack around the business planning process, which starts to set out the things that we want to do and the money we want to attribute to it. There is an opportunity for us to set out a broader amount of money that's provided from government in terms of its grant to support that delivery. I think, Councillor Obi, I've heard many times the importance of delivery. I get that totally. We've developed our strategy, we've developed our strategic investment plan. The next steps and the next iteration of the business planning is, now is the time. You've got that solid evidence base, you've agreed that direction, translate that into delivery. I think the opportunity through the business planning process, it's my technical expert there, through the business planning process is a way of boosting the amount of money to help local transport authorities deliver the aspirations within the SIP. And that it's an unsatisfactory set of timings that have resulted in the situation we face ourselves in. I think I would want to look forward to how we can secure more money from government to deliver your ambitions locally. Yeah. Indeed, and I remember your call from last time about how members would wish to be more engaged with the business planning process, and we're kick-starting that as well as part of these set of papers.
I'm mic'd up. I don't know about you. I hope I'm mic'd up anyway. Does it sound like I am? Good. Thank you very much. Useful discussion. I'm sorry we are where we are, but if we're not going to move anything else, are we happy to agree the recommendation as printed? Thank you. Thank you for the debate. We now come to business representation. Rupert, and you're going to introduce this one?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just bear with me 1 second. Members will be aware that up until relatively recently, our business representation was covered off by local enterprise partnerships. So we had 5 local enterprise partnerships within the South East, and the board agreed that 2 of those 5 should be drawn up into the board, and that has served us well over the last few years in ensuring that we have a mechanism to hear the business voice. At a previous meeting, we spoke about development of a terms of reference for a business advisory group. So given the change in the status of LEPs, where many of them do no longer exist and their strategic economic functions have moved into local authorities, we worked with both Daniel and Vince on a terms of reference, which is within your pack, and we're seeking agreement to that terms of reference for a business advisory group. I would also be seeking agreement to Daniel and Vince as our sort of business reps here on this board to co-chair a business advisory group. And I'd be seeking your agreement to form that business advisory group so that you hear from the voice of businesses, and those are set out in the terms of reference, and that includes core membership and governance arrangements.
Thank you. So, any comments or questions? No? Thank you very much. Again, we've got the recommendations on the screen, so we're happy to take that forward as printed. Thank you very much. Sorry, I've just agreed it, but carry on. We can always have a delayed
decision, of course. It's just clarification on the representatives of that business group, just to say, how is that selected, and who's invited, as it were, to be part of that.
So the core membership seeks representation from the FSP, from the 5 chambers of commerce that exist within our regional area. We also think it's important, given the international gateway nature, to have a representative of airports, and we're suggesting Gatwick, given it's smack bang in the patch. And from a port, we haven't agreed which particular port. We think a representative from the Department of Business and Trade, if that name still remains, that would be important. But we also recognise that a lot of the LEP functions transferred to upper-tier local authorities and unitary authorities, and we would want representatives from the Local Authority Economy Board. Now, in some areas, for example, Kent, I think I'm right in saying Kent and Medway comes together as one board, so you've got 2 of the constituent authorities can be represented by Kent Business Board. You have another growth board in East Sussex, similar in Hampshire. I can't remember what they're called, you have to excuse me, but I know there's a formation of relevant authorities. So we think where the function has transferred to effectively a local authority growth board that may or may not be more than one authority, that those reps should be represented. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I just wanted, there might be some changes. I'm thinking in terms of possibly Greater Brighton and how it all fits in the future. So I just want to just flag up where the changes come in to make sure we've got representation. If there are changes regionally that perhaps align with some devolved movements, to make sure we've got good representation of those new entities.
I agree, and I think the important thing with the terms of reference is recognising the importance of that local authority economic function in a post-let world. I recognise that with devolution and the like, that might change. The other thing I should say in relation to devolution, if in the event combined authorities appeared within the South East, they don't exist at the moment, then the legislation on which TFSC followed allows for combined authorities to become representatives of as relevant authorities in the same sense as a local transport authority. So I recognise that this is a bit of a moving feast in terms of what devolution might bring, and we're very much guided by you as local authority reps on how that economic function is set up within your geography or indeed geographies.
Can I add something, Rupert? I think part of our intention was to grow this semi-organically, so have a group initially that would work out how it could make the biggest, most effective contribution to TFSE and to this group. In a way, there is the luxury, it not being public sector, that we can dictate that its purpose is to feed this organisation, and they're not voted, they're not elected members generally. They are representatives of the business function within the region, and so I think Vince and my intention was to try and make sure that we could share something with Rupert's team that would, as I say, feed this group's decisions as effectively as possible from an economic perspective.
Probably just add to that, Chair. I think we saw also this is an evolutionary year. This year we need to establish those processes, see if it's useful, decide in a year's time whether we want it or not, or indeed change the representation on this board from that group, because our role is to set this up and get it working and then see how the voice of business best serves TFSE going forward. But this year is a very much development year in that operation.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. We had agreed as printed, so we'll move on to the next item, which is business planning 25-26. And Keir, going to deal with that, please?
Yes, I might just sit here if that's all right. It's slightly awkward up there. So two things to agree for this agenda item, and it builds on the discussion we just had at board. So the first thing is about agreeing the process for planning next year's business plan. So at the previous board meeting, board agreed to have an initial engagement meeting today. That the draft business plan should be prepared and brought back to board in October. And then the final business plan should be brought back to the December board for partnership board to sign off. And all of that, as Rupert mentioned earlier, is contingent on when we get any business planning guidance from the Department for Transport, because anything we do has to be in line with their direction, what they tell us to do, as they're one of our primary funders. So we are still proposing to stick to that timeline, and if the department brings business planning guidance out after the December board, we'll come back to the next board with any revisions that need to be made. But the main point for discussion on the timeline, and it links back to the discussion we just had, is we're proposing to add an extra workshop with board members in September. Oh, we need to click through. There we go. Thanks. So it's a decision for board. Are you happy to have an extra workshop in the diary in September so we can agree everything that should be in the next year's business plan?
Thank you. Questions, comments? No?
Not yet.
We don't. The sooner we can get these dates in the diary, the sooner or the better attendance we might get.
Thanks. And if everyone agrees, the next thing to quickly touch on was the initial priorities for the business plan. So we've set these out in the paper, and these are in line with priority areas of work that the Department for Transport have outlined for us. So the first thing is finishing the delivery of a refreshed transport strategy. Next one is scaling up the Centre of Excellence, so increasing the quantity and quality of support we provide for our local authorities. Laying the groundwork for a refresh of the strategic investment plan once the new transport strategy has been done. Then there's a bit on our technical work, so rollout of the freight awareness programme, EV support, and the regional active travel strategy. And the final thing is developing our analytical and modelling capability. But I think based on the discussion earlier, Councillor Roby, I might suggest we add the scheme development support as a priority, initial priority.
Okay. Again, any other comments or questions?
The member workshop will be able to shape this.
Sorry?
The member workshop referred to there will be able to shape this.
Yes. Yes. So we're again happy to agree the recommendation of printed. Thank you. We now come on to the transport strategy refresh update, and I think you're going to take it over.
I will take that, Chair, if I may. It sort of builds upon the discussion we've had in the breakout sessions before lunch. I think there's quite a lot of information and quite a lot of views that came back into the refresh. I am sorry we've not been able to have that discussion with you previously. We had hoped to have one in June as part of the Centre of Excellence launch. But the general election sort of scuppered that a bit for us. So it means we're later in our programme having this conversation about those broad areas. What I would like to propose, Chairman, is that you note, in accordance with the paper, the refresh on the transport strategy. And within that is a timeline which takes us to public consultation on the transport strategy agreed in December. But if I work back from that, I'm really keen that we get underneath those sort of headline broad mission statements that you saw in the previous session. And I'm keen that we establish, if board members are willing, a task and finish group to help us sort of nail this down. So that might be 5 or 6 members. It's an ask on your time, but we'll try and be as light as we possibly can. I think coming together 2 or 3 times between now and October, I know it's going to be challenging, but we can do it in fairly bite-sized. Doesn't always have to be face-to-face. We can use Teams as well, just to check and test, so that we're getting the right level of granularity as we go into this strategy refresh. Because I think the way in which Vince mentioned it earlier on, it is important in terms of how we influence ministers. This is the strategic direction is what they'll be looking at, and we need to make sure we get it right in order to move into things like delivery and SIP implementation. So I'm keen to establish that task and finish group. I would suggest 5 members, possibly 6 if there's real willingness, and we will work with your offices to find times, and that will allow us to take those missions and work with them and work with you to get us in a much better place for October.
I think that makes absolute sense. Have we agreed the simplest way to get that group together?
Well, I'd be very happy, Chairman, to have, if there's any hands that would like to go up. Well, here we go. So Councillor Dennis, Vince, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Roby. Any others?
We won't exclude.
Councillor Schweitman.
We won't exclude anybody else, but
Councillor Meeson. So that's 6. That's perfect. And that would be fantastic. We'll get onto your offices. We'll arrange some times. We'll be as light on your diary as we possibly can, but it gives us the opportunity to work through until October.
Thank you all very, very much for that. I'm not sure. Did we agree the recommendations as printed? If we didn't, I'm asking you to, please. Yeah. So that's 11. So we now move on to the delivery of the SIP. Is that right? So Sarah, I think you're going to introduce. Thank you. I can't see that. I can't want to do James's slides? No. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Afternoon, everybody. So yes, this is a presentation on the board paper relating to SIP delivery. I won't go through everything that's in the paper, and I am going to, I'm afraid, do it in a slightly different order than it is in the paper, just for ease of taking you through it. So just the key highlights I want to mention. First of all, regarding the story map, this, you'll recall, is our interactive map that's on our website. It allows users to go in, explore the SIP schemes as they wish, get lots of information about it. That's been updated following our discussions with your officers around where all the schemes are, what progress has been made in the last year. But the reason I wanted to highlight it is that the piece of work has been entered into the British Cartographic Society Awards. So in conjunction with our partners Steer, who several of them are around the room, I just wanted to sort of recognise the work that Steer have done for us. And I think the fact that we can enter some of our work into national awards is really testament to the great work that TFSC does. So just wanted to highlight that to everybody.
Very good.
Moving on slightly, I just wanted to again highlight around the major road network. We continue to provide support to your scheme promoters as they try to navigate the business case processes through Department for Transport. We're also looking ahead to an MRN2. Again, however, as with a lot of things with the change of government, we're not yet quite sure on what the direction of that is, but we are working closely with our colleagues in DFT to understand where MRN2 is likely to go, and then therefore how we can best support delivery of schemes through that. That leads quite nicely on to the roads investment strategy work. As you will recall, TFSE has been involved with National Highways and the Department for Transport throughout the development of the RIS process. We have regular meetings with them. In fact, we had a meeting last week around where things are. And if it's okay, Chair, I'd like to invite Richard Leonard just to give a brief update to the board.
Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues. Just to say, delighted to be here as ever, and thanks for the introduction around the RIS. As Sarah said, it's been very much a collaborative approach through the development of our evidence base, route strategies connecting the country, and working closely with colleagues about the nature and the shape of the investment in the roads investment strategy. We came here earlier this year just to talk through that, to talk through how we were thinking around the shape of the RIS and how that aligned to our priorities. The RIS was in a fairly well advanced state of development before the election. Clearly, ministers will want to review the RIS, so that's the Roads Investment Strategy for 25 to 30. I'm just conscious some members may not be aware of that. That sets out the principles under which the SRN is improved, so how we think about National Highways' role, and that covers things like maintenance renewals, things about improvements to the network, safety, things about how we tackle climate change and carbon. So it sets out our investment, so the level of funding available, but also sets out the activities that government wants us to undertake. Clearly, the RIS was developed pre-election. There's a need for a review of that. We provided advice to ministers on options around the RIS and how that can be taken forward. And in that, we have talked about the role of partners and the important role of partners in shaping the roads investment strategy. And I think that's really important. And one reflection as well on the conversation, I think planning and thinking strategically about the needs for the South East is really important. Setting out your agenda to government is really important. And it's about integrated networks. It's about thinking about outcomes, and it's about thinking about a new agenda for government that we can take forward together. It is an opportunity, and I think that's really important to say, and it's an opportunity for you to present your narrative and your story about what you need as a region. And I think working across the network, working with all STBs, I think TFSE has got a really strong story to tell. I think the transport strategy works brilliant, and I think the SIP works great as well. So it's an opportunity to reinforce those messages to government. And I think for where we sit with National Highways, we recognise that together we can present a case for roads, but more importantly, a case for roads in an integrated transport system, and that's where we want to be. And again, it's about outcomes. How do we support growth? How do we support communities? How do we support access to jobs and health? So that's where we are. And we're hoping on the RIS we will have some sense of direction probably after the summer recess, if there is a summer recess, I'm not sure. But we hope to have some direction. And the key thing is that, we met with Sarah and DFT last week, and we had a really open conversation where things are. I think that's really important. We'll continue that dialogue. And more importantly, we'll continue to work with you to shape the RIS. Lastly, good luck on the award. I'm confident you'll win it. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you for the update. And I mean, I think the thing to glean there is that there is an opportunity for us to put the case. So I think that's really refreshing to hear. Questions, comments? Joy.
Given the fact that in the election narrative, the A27 Arundel was to be abandoned in favour of funding some potholes around the country, and given the fact that it's a fairly strategic priority within our plans, and also A27, there's numbers of pockets of A27 work, including Chichester and Worthing, which Arundel, as you know, is in the middle of. I mean, obviously, we're pretty concerned about the way this will actually go. Obviously we'd like some clarity sooner rather than later, but it feels like it's been not ridiculed, but it feels like it's been put on some sort of very low agenda, and yet National Highways have taken it to the highest level in terms of putting together a business case, etc. Now, I know that it wasn't National Highways' first choice, the route that eventually we ended up with, and it certainly wasn't everybody else's choice. It was something that came to as a result of judicial review. If it is turned out at RIS 3, what's going to happen on RIS 4?
So I was expecting a question on A27, Joy, and as soon as I got the mic, I thought Joy's going to ask me. I think yes. We recognised during electioneering, we saw the same headlines you did. I think we've given advice to ministers on the shape of the RIS and the shape of the investment. I think ultimately ministers have choices to make around how they see the RIS and the future RIS funding, and ultimately that will have to consider those schemes, where those schemes are, and how those schemes sort of perform against those priorities. I think that's probably all I can say to you, but just to say that, I would expect ministers, and I know ministers are looking at the totality of the RIS, they're looking at all of those investment decisions, and as I say, I know they're keen to move forward and progress things, so hopefully we'll have some understanding of how that new agenda fits. But I do think it's important to reflect in terms of the narrative from government. I think we heard before from Dan, investment is needed in transport to deliver those priorities for government. We talked around integrated transport networks, we talk around how we support economic growth. So I think ultimately that storyboard is still strong. It's strong for the SIP, strong for the transport strategy. But unfortunately, I can't give you an answer now. It's probably not worth my pay grade. It'd be very dangerous if I did as well, I think is the answer. But Joy, thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So that brings me on to the last part of this paper, and that is regarding the scheme development funding. So there's obviously been a little bit of a discussion previously, but I'll just sort of take you through some of the points that are in the paper. So last year we did have scheme development funding within the budget, and we were able to fund 4 schemes to do some early stage scheme development work. Those are set out in Table 1 in Appendix 1 of the paper, and the money went to Kent County Council, Medway Council, and then Portsmouth and Southampton City Councils for 4 different schemes across different modes of transport, and that was very deliberate. All of that work is either just about complete or will be complete very, very soon. So some good progress has been made there. As you've already heard and agreed earlier, the 24-25 budget also includes a further allocation at an increased level to that we had last year, albeit not quite as much as we had hoped. And the process that was used to allocate the funding this year has been exactly the same as we had used last year. And that is based on a very strong premise that we need to work together across the region to collectively deliver the schemes that are in the SIP. So therefore we've aimed to bring forward a mix of schemes across different modes and different geographies, and within that also trying to increase the capacity of the local transport authorities across the region. We deliberately designed the process to be very light touch, and that was welcomed by the technical officers that we discussed it with through the process. We know across the region there's a dislike of competitive bidding and onerous application forms that you need to fill in. Despite having more money this year, we were, however, 3 times oversubscribed for the amount of funding that we had available. And so we had to develop a shortlisting process. Very keen to stress here, it's not a competitive bidding process. As I said earlier, we didn't want to develop any of those kind of things. The case for the schemes has already been made because the schemes are already within the strategic investment plan. So it was about shortlisting and trying to work out how we can get the greatest impact for the limited funding we have available, how we can support a major road network pipeline of schemes, and also how we can support increased capability, capacity, and the centre of excellence across the region. So the shortlist was developed using a collaborative light touch approach involving lots of dialogue with the technical officers across the region. We based some scoring, very light touch scoring, on the existing technical evidence base that had been developed through the area studies and the SIP development process. We tried to be fair across the region. We wanted to really understand which schemes are able to be brought forward, how can we make that go as far as possible. And as I say, it was about moving forward those schemes that are in the SIP. So following all those discussions and deliberations, which we did take through the Transport Strategy Working Group as well, and as I say, they really welcomed that light touch approach, the short list of schemes is set out in Table 3 in Appendix 1. 3 of those schemes, through dialogue with the officers, actually were offered less money than they had initially asked for. But we did get to a point where we could allocate the money we did have across the region, say, to support all of the schemes. I think it's really important that until we actually get into the work, we're not going to know the exact costs. And also within the SIP implementation budget line, we do have allocations to work with Richard and his team in trying to bring forward some of the schemes that are in RIS by supporting the strategic case for them, And also, we would like to start bringing forward some of the larger, more complex multimodal schemes across the region. But for both of those things, we recognise that we need to await government direction and policy on those to know whether we can do it this year or whether that will have to be something for future years. So within the paper, there is a paragraph and an explanation where we request that Rupert retains the flexibility for TFSE officers to have the flexibility to manage that budget. And that does mean that the reserve scheme that's on the list, were we not able to move ahead with some of the risk schemes, that could then come forward. We would like to be able to retain that flexibility ourselves, but that is obviously your decision. As the recommendations currently stand, 12 of our local authorities submitted expressions of interest across the 2 financial years, either on their own or as the lead for a group of authorities, particularly down in the Solent. We've got a lot of authorities coming together, which again is obviously welcomed. 11 schemes are currently able to be provided with development support, and that actually benefits 15 out of the 16 local authorities within the TFSE. We do really recognise the importance of this early stage scheme support. We know this is an area that you struggle to find funding to get off the ground, so we do want to try and maintain this in future years, and it's very, very clear that demand for it is high. So as we look to continue to provide this funding, we do propose that we work with the Transport Strategy Working Group technical officers to see how we should allocate it in future years. There are obviously a number of ways we could. But we would very much advocate for sort of that light touch, not an onerous competitive process, but very much working together across the region to bring forward those schemes. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Comments? Joy.
Thank you. I thought it would be pertinent to actually state that of the 3 out of the 4 items that are on there do impact West Sussex. It's not just the first one. The Surrey one impacts and goes into West Sussex. And the Brighton and Hove one, though it says the A27-23 Patcham interchange, I have to say the issues there regularly impact all the way up to Bolney, with queuing traffic up from the 23. So that's many miles. So that does. And I think the fact it says A27, but the A259 Chichester one is actually the junction with the A27. And I suppose I'm yet again highlighting the serious issues we have with the A27 across the camp.
Please, Trevor.
Thank you. And just perhaps pick up on that point, Joy. Perhaps I need to understand this scheme slightly better. I thought it's particularly relating to the junction interchange rather than A23 up to Bolney. But to clarify what's in that scope and not in that scope. No. Right, because of the interchange is not working as well. Good. All right, sorry. I now understand what you mean. Thank you.
Please.
Yeah, just to say that we have spoken to patients.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you. Thank you. And the recommendations are as said. We agree? Thank you, Sarah. Response to consultation, Rupert? Is that you?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is just one item as a response to consultation. This is around long-term adaptation, so it's effectively about UK transport adapting to the impacts of climate change. I think broadly we would welcome long-term adaptation plans. There are a number of assets, transport infrastructure assets within the South East that are vulnerable to, for example, flooding from either rivers or the sea. But in welcoming it, what we do say is that government needs to provide clear guidance and, more importantly, funding, so that making our transport networks more resilient to extremes of weather should not come at a cost of other services that local authorities provide. So it needs to be funded. It shouldn't be competing with other priorities that local transport authorities have to deal with. In effect, adaptation funding shouldn't be just an add-on to local authority maintenance budgets or new works. So that's the essence of the consultation, to broadly welcome adaptation plans and policies, but asking that because of the financial pressure on local transport authorities and indeed operators, that clear guidance and support from government, including funding, follows through on it.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Trevor.
Thank you, and I think welcome this report and this keep climate adaptation very much on the agenda. And yes, in terms of transport infrastructure, very important. I think perhaps look at it in a holistic manner as well. One of the things that may be more pertinent with more frequent or intense rain events, for instance, is the risk of flooding. Now, risk of flooding may be resolved through better drainage to alleviate the impact upon transport systems, for instance. So it's about the transport, the roads and infrastructure, but we've got to work with drainage authorities and water companies and others to think through how we can do that better to minimise the impacts of climate adaptation, a holistic approach, and how that's funded would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Joy?
Following on from that, Trevor, is just to say it's also not only the funding, it's also about working with the different partners as well, whether that's the Environment Agency or whether that's the water companies, because often the issues arise on those intense rainfalls is not just about SUDs, it's also about overflow from rivers, etc. So it's quite a complex area, but causing enormous issues for us.
Any other comments or questions? No? Recommendations are on the screen. We're happy to agree. Thank you very much.
So we do want the recommendations.
Yeah, no, we've done that. I'm sorry, I'm just a bit confused. My briefing note and the agenda don't chime up. So agenda item 14 is the recent update.
Yeah, so Chairman, this is it's the Chief Officer's report. It's just a report to you, just indicating the work that we have been up to. Clearly, there's an emerging national policy picture. With the general election having taken place on the 4th of July. We've touched upon DfT priorities and government priorities. Their headlines at the minute, we'll want to understand what that means and how that plays out in terms of transport for the South East. And I think the work that you agreed earlier on next steps will be quite helpful. Just also to say that the STBs nationally continue to work together. As well as you speaking with a single voice on issues, it's important that the subnational transport bodies around England also speak to government on single issues. I think the benefits of doing that are around avoiding duplication, driving efficiency, and I might highlight the common analytical framework that can be used to develop business cases. That was initially a Transport for the North initiative, and that we are using and developing for our cases here in the South East. There are two other points I'd just draw out, one around the wider South East Freight Forum. I think, freight has always been a bit opaque and getting underneath issues such as, at one level, lorry parking and welfare facilities, at another level, broader warehousing policy for the South East and everything in between. So it brings together operators as well as Transport East, They have big shipping interests given the Felixstowe, but also England's economic heartland. And coupled with that, we are working with those two STBs because we form that sort of donut, if you like, around London through the wider South East Rail Partnership with Network Rail and Great British Railways. And are going to be watching with interest, particularly with the GBR transition team, what emerges in the King's Speech around rail reforms, passenger services. So the purpose of the report is just to highlight to you some of the activities we've been up to. I'm really happy to take any questions, Chairman. There isn't any specific recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? No?
The numbering's gone. Yeah. So it's one that just joins all this together. Talking with colleagues from Eurotunnel, they're obviously very, very keen on getting more freight trains through the tunnel, and it's something that links all of those together. We've seen published at various times numbers for the gauge enhancement needed across southern England. I don't think we need to spend money on it because Network Rail and others are looking at it. But I think it would be useful to have that higher up in our agenda so that we've got a watching brief on the freight gauge clearance, which hits all of our goals and international connectivity, greater use of rail freight, etc. And it's just something that brings those groups together. So,
thank you. Joy?
While we're talking about freight, and I'll move it on to buses as well, did they talk about the use of hydrogen for freight in terms of hydrogen lorries? Rather than, because we talked about electrification, but have we talked about hydrogen? And the reason I'll sort of move on to that one, thinking about buses, is that we have the first European hydrogen filling station at Crawley, which is running into problems because of health and safety issues. That not they haven't got a health and safety issue, it's just there isn't any legislation or any regulations around it at the moment. And because at the beginning and the forefront, they're getting rather frustrated, especially since we won funding for 40-odd hydrogen buses, and at this rate we won't be able to fill them because it's the first, and it's how we deal with innovation on that. So just thought I'd raise that one up. I know it's sort of freight, but not freight, but there is hydrogen lorries coming along as well.
Thank you.
And I mean, in terms of this government's policy on hydrogen and freight, I haven't seen anything specific as yet. Doesn't mean to say that it's not there and I just haven't clocked it. I know the previous government talked about hydrogen. I understand there are some complications around hydrogen and freight, but I'll wait to see what this government does in relation to policy on it. I think with both EV and alternative fuel sources, it has historically been sort of, the thousand flowers bloom approach. And actually what is helpful is knowing what is the policy direction in relation to things like EV and hydrogen, and then how do we, both at Southern National Transport Body level, but more importantly at local transport authority level, take forward that sort of headline policy.
Okay. Thank you. So the recommendation is, just to note, the report. So thank you for that. Jeff, I think we're on to you now, please.
Thank you. A very short presentation from me today, I think, but I thought you deserved me to talk to you since you might not have got to page 120 on the notes for the meeting. So here we go. So the advisory panel did meet recently on July the 2nd, just a couple of days before other important issues, and we discussed the potential opportunities and challenges for what was becoming obvious. It will be a new government, but we used the time to have a good discussion around the priorities for TFSE. We continue to review and refresh the Transport Forum attendees, including contact with stakeholders to confirm appropriate representation and correct contact details from their organisations. And it's interesting that they were very keen to have a second in-person event to take place in the autumn to try and pick up the pace a bit more for what we can produce. And all I'm asking on a simple recommendation is that the members of the Partnership Board are recommended to note the recent work of the Transport Forum and the Advisory Panel.
Thank you, as always, Jeff, and congratulations on getting another year. I need a first to congratulate and the check's in the post, but no, thank you very much. Any comments or questions? I mean, I think the breadth of what's going on will continue to grow, Jeff, and it is, I'm sure, an enormous task to try and keep focused because there's an awful lot out there. So well done. I think, no, so we'll note that. Thank you very much. Then we come on to the Centre of Excellence. Is Keir going to deal with that again, please? Thank you.
Yes, so it's actually Emily Bailey in my team that leads on the Centre of Excellence, but she's getting a plane to Barcelona. So unfortunately for you all, you're stuck with me. But we wanted to put it on the agenda just because we formally launched the Centre of Excellence on June the 18th with officers from local transport authorities. But we wanted to do something with board members in this meeting today. And I think we recognised that the June the 18th meeting was just before the election, so probably wasn't going to be the time when a lot of councillors were able to come and do something. But yeah, so for those of you who, well, it might be your first time hearing about the Centre of Excellence, this originally was a government ask, I think in the Levelling Up white paper of, I'm looking at PTA 2022, I think, that regional centres of excellence would be set up to support local transport authority officers. Basically, government, I think, was recognising that local transport authorities are very stretched. It's been a hard time financially, and there's some benefits to pooling resources, pooling knowledge and expertise. So I've got a video here, which will hopefully work. Oh, I might need to go to the back to press play.
Man's gone.
Yeah, it's work when we practice it, or we've got my flexible, so
We might have to skip that. There's an awful lot of really unhappy people here. Moving on.
I'll run through the presentation quickly. The video basically just gives a brief overview of how the site looks and all the features on the site. Essentially, the Centre of Excellence is a space for officers and partners, including universities. I think DFT are going to be on their national highways, some of our other partner agencies. But essentially it's a platform built for them. So it has things like resources, we're sharing tools on there. There's also a chat forum, so if someone's doing something really well in Brighton and Hove, they can talk about it, and then officers from other authorities can see and learn from it. But as well as the launch that we had on June the 18th, where we brought together officers to do some training, we're also going to do some other set-piece training events where we take officers from each of the authorities around to other places in the region. So the point is, where there's best practice happening, we want to showcase that and share it. So this just shows the objectives of the Centre of Excellence, which I think I've set out. So these are the whole process. It's been co-designed by LTA officers. We've got I was hoping he was back. Never mind. We have a Centre of Excellence steering group, which officers are on, which has basically decided what it should focus on. Primarily, it's something that's bespoke to the TFSE area, and it's all about practical advice and support, as it says, getting economies of scale as well. So a few slides I'll probably skip over, but essentially we've launched the Centre of Excellence, so we're moving into business as usual, and because of that, the steering group is meeting a bit less frequently as well. As it says here, we've had a lot of engagement, so we've got a lot of regional universities and I think some universities from elsewhere across the UK signed up. All the professional institutions, so CECA, CIHT, TPS and ICP, all on this site, all providing support and resources. But this is the key thing. So as part of the work, we sent a survey out to all the local transport authorities in our region, essentially asking officers, what are the key areas of support that you want? What are the things that you're struggling with the most or are doing well at but could get even better at? So these were the 3 top areas. So business case development, which we touched on earlier, policy strategy and development, and improving sustainability and lowering carbon. So it's a bit of a weird graphic, but the blue bar chart basically shows existing capability that officers have, and then the orange is where they want to increase their capability this year. So we've got a lot of metrics that we're going to be testing this on, and hopefully we'll be able to come back to the board next year and demonstrate the increase in capability that's been brought about. And hopefully board members, you'll also recognise this in your interactions with us as well. I'll skip over this. So this is just to say site usage is going pretty well. So we've managed to get 125 users across the South East region, and that's every single Transport of the South East Authority. There's someone signed up, and yeah, lots of them have multiple sign-ups, and people are using the chat forum, resources and case studies. So that's it. Yeah, so sorry Emily wasn't here and we couldn't get the video, but basically we wanted to do something just to let members know, with thanks to your officers and your financial support, we've launched a Centre of Excellence, and hopefully it makes a big difference.
Thank you. And timing is everything, and it's just a pity the election got in the way of the formal launch. But again, thank you to everybody that's been involved, because I'm sure this will be something that will continue to grow and be of use to everybody. So thank you. Questions or comments? No? Again, thanks very much. We now come on to technical programme update. Kate, I think you can. Thank you.
That isn't an in-your-face mic, that is. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. The technical programme report just updates members on the events that have taken place since the last board meeting, and I will go through some of those highlights at the moment now. The electric vehicle charging infrastructure strategy, the work on forecasting for vehicle fleet demands that may result in an impact happening on the TFSE area's charging network. This is due to be completed in the summer, and we will then share it with the board and our LTA colleagues after that. The EVCI visualisation tool that was mentioned earlier, that's been developed by TfN. This is to be launched by TFSE over the summer also, and there will be a training work that takes place in September for all the local transport authority officers who are interested in learning how it works. For the regional active travel strategy, a draft strategy and action plan is currently undergoing internal review at the moment, and we expect to present the final version to the October board in October, sorry. The implementation of the TFSE Future Mobility Strategy and Action Plan. A Future Mobility Forum was held on the 18th of June, and we had a very interesting presentation from the Capital District Transportation Authority, which is based in Albany, USA, and they just gave us a rundown of their different mobility programs. But it is quite interesting to know that it is an organisation that's all totally run by their local authority members, and it's owned by them also, but they also are managing to lever in private financing to fund the programmes that they run. So we'd be interested to hear more about that in due course. The next forum will be held on 23rd of September. It'll be an in-person meeting. Just to note that There has been talk previously at these updates about the mode propensities tool. Unfortunately, we only received one proposal, and that did not meet our expectations in terms of methodology. So we are going to review our requirements going forward, and we will let you know in due course whether we are going to go out for another procurement process in relation to this, or whether we might end up doing something slightly different. Moving on to freight, the Alternative Freight Fuel Infrastructure Mapping Tool, commonly known as ALFI, identifies, as you may have heard previously, identifies current and future HGV recharging and refueling locations on the SRN and MRN, and this has now been made available to TFSE. It was developed by Midlands Connect with data from all the different SDPs in England, and we are now reviewing it, and we are planning then going to plan how we might introduce it to our local authority partners in the autumn. So that's some work that we are going to be developing, and we'll talk to our local authority partners as we go forward. The second wider South East Freight Forum, as Rupert mentioned earlier, was held on the 20th of June, actually just in rooms just up the corridor from here, and it focused on the challenges faced by the freight and logistics sector in decarbonisation, and also how we could perhaps influence or add value to the work that we are already doing, either as SDBs or as individual businesses. The studies on waterborne freight and warehousing, they are continuing, and we hope to present our findings on those to the October board. Last but by no means least, the Carbon Assessment Playbook that was jointly developed between Transport East, EEH, and obviously that has now been completed. It looks at the way to help LTAs assess the carbon reduction potential of their LTP proposals. And there is going to be a joint event to launch this on the 23rd of August. And I'm hoping and I believe that invites have already gone out. So that's good. Anybody have any questions that I can answer or take back? I hasten to add, I'm not the expert in all of these matters.
Questions, comments? Trevor.
Thank you. That's a really helpful report and summary. I really appreciate that. And I think some really important topics addressed within that. I'm just mindful of the changing government, new Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, for instance, and other departments as well. Do you feel that, or is there any sense that we may be affecting some of the pace of change, particularly in relation to decarbonisation and EV infrastructure charging? In relation to this assessment, as a timeline impact upon some of the initiatives that the government's indicated they're committed to.
Are you referring to the Carbon Assessment Playbook in particular?
Well, that and the EV charging infrastructure as well.
Okay, they're two of they are not my non-specialist subjects, sir, I'm afraid to say. So I will take your question away, and I will get those, I think it's Ben and Mark, funnily enough, who I'm obviously standing in for today, and I will get them to respond to your question either as a combination or together.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you. The recommendations are on the board. Are we happy to agree there? Thank you. So we now come to communications. Duncan?
Let's start with communications and engagement. We're hitting our objectives as per the 2024-2025 plan. Starting with engagement, someone decided to call a general election on the 22nd of May, which meant we had to pause our MP engagement plan. Just ahead of that, though, we had successful meetings with Matt Rodder, who's the MP for Reading East and continues to be so, and Stephen Morgan, MP for Portsmouth South. Going forward, we will engage with the new MPs, of which we have 50 out of a total of 76 across the southeast or the TFSE region. Just to put that in some form of context, that's 29 Labour, 28 Conservative, 18 Liberal Democrat, and 1 Green MP. Moving on to communication activity, As has been mentioned previously, we had our transport strategy refresh and the Your Voices survey that managed to achieve over 1,500 results. That was shared by various local authorities across our patch and a number of MPs, and we were lucky enough to generate some decent local media coverage with that particular survey. Our podcast continues, our monthly podcast, the TFSE podcast. Recent episodes have covered the Centre of Excellence and also the Transport Strategy Refresh, and we will continue to do monthly episodes, including active travel. And our website revamp continues. We are revamping the TFSE website to make it fit for the future and to also offer a really good window to the work that we do. And that will be ready in time for our MP engagement work in the next couple of months. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Duncan? Thank you. Quite a big task, 50 new MPs, but we'll get through that. Any help that any of you can offer along the way, Duncan and I will both be very keen to help. I think it is important. It was one of the areas that I felt that we needed to do work on, and Duncan put in a really sterling effort over the last year. Now we start again on quite a few of them. Interesting times. Thank you for that. Brings us to AOB. Is there any other business that anyone wishes to raise? Vince? It's right behind you.
That could be a comedy moment, couldn't it? I wasn't sure if the last item or this. Is there anything more we should be doing on Lower Thames Crossing, given its delay due to the general election, the importance both to this board and to the local travel plans that are being constructed around the country at the moment?
Is there anything from Kent's point of view? Do we need to push or?
It's good. It's in the DCO process at the moment, isn't it? Yeah, go on, Joe.
Thank you. Joe Ratcliffe, Transport Strategy Manager, Kent County Council. Yes, we understand that the 4th of October, I think, is the date that the Secretary of State has penciled in to make the decision. That was obviously deferred because of the pre-election period. There's been a series of consultations since the examination closed at the end of December last year. I think there's one that actually closes tomorrow, which is seeking comments on a variety of things, including the National Highways response to the questions of the Secretary of State on the removal of the rest and service area at the A2 Cobham services, which obviously KCC will be responding to, given the issues of lorry parking in the county. But whether there's anything further that can be done, I mean, that's obviously, I think, just wait and see for the decision to come out in, 3 months' time, is it? Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Any other comments? No? No, are there any other business? I can't see anyone rushing to put their hand up. I understand the next date is going to be changed, is that correct?
Yes, we'll cut the LG, there's a double booking, so we will come back to you with that.
Date of the next meeting, but it is in October, as soon as we can. Goodness gracious, we've finished. Thank you all very much for your attendance today. I hope you think it's been worthwhile. The session we had this morning, I'm sure, will add some very valuable points to the consultation today. And it's always good to see you all. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting.